Previously, we talked with Bean and Jamie about kids' crew on a sailboat. If you missed it, be sure to check it out.
Another thing, right? Like talking about safety and like, you know, just thinking, like when you live close to cities where it's hospitals and like, you know, just being in remote places where you might, you know, what if you break your leg? Like, what do you do?
That's right.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, that's one of the big fears as a parent, right? Is what about your kid's health and in an emergency? We did do a lot of medical training before we left. But the reality is that there aren't very many times when we're really truly that remote also from medical help. Probably 80% of the time it's within 12 hours of medical help.
Yeah.
I think that's partly true and partly not, sorry. But it's that it's not the distance, it's the time, and it's the hours. But still, learning how to manage basic stuff is important, basic situations as best you can. You're never going to be a doctor unless you're a doctor, and you're never going to be a nurse unless you're a nurse. But the other side of that is that the perception in mainstream life that if you don't use our brand of chemical death to clean your counters, you're going to get sick and you're probably going to get a virus and you're going to end up in the hospital and die. And there's all this stuff about risk and what you need to do to avoid those risks that to us seem kind of silly. And because you don't have to do these things. You can live in a way that's very practical and still reduce risks. So we talk about things that to us seem tangible threats. When we're in Islamic countries, they're not terrorists. They're okay people. It's okay. If you read the news back home, you'd think you're going to blow up if you walk down the street in Indonesia. And so what the perception of risk is versus the reality of risk I think evolves over time. The more time you're out cruising, you have to be smart. You have to be cautious. Yeah, we talk about kids. If we're going to go and tie up the boat, and there's a boat too close to us, I'll have one of the kids on that side with a fender holding it, and I always remind them, don't use your body as a fender. Always just a fender. If we're going to hit, we hit. It's okay. So those sorts of practical things are real. Yeah, the commercialized version of bacteria and stuff gets a little goofy.
So do you guys think, like, looking back, do you think your kids get more sick, less sick, or is there less germs going around, or is it even a difference now that you're out sailing?
I think that the kids are sick way less, but they also are not. They're also not in the herd most of the time. They're not in a school setting or. We don't fly in airplanes, or buses and things where you get lots of germs. But that said, we're in third world countries where you get all sorts of creepy stuff going on. And,
it's like we were talking about earlier. We were all getting sick in Madagascar, right? I mean, it was just a really tough place.
So good.
I know, we couldn't stay away from the food. I had to keep going back for more of those good little zebu kebabs and brochettes. Oh God.
Madagascar.
Yeah, love it.
But you read a report on a place like Madagascar, and it's dengue and malaria and foodborne illnesses.
They're like bubonic plague, right?
And
people were asking us seriously if we were going to decide not to go because they have the plague. And yes, it is possible, but basically it's treatable, and you're really only at risk of acquiring it if you're one of the folks who are unfortunate enough to be fairly destitute and live in a slum in a densely populated part of Madagascar. We're pretty privileged, right? And we're just not at risk.
You have like a full-on medical kit on board.
We have malaria test kits. We have
antibiotics.
Medication. We have
full spectrum antibiotics. Great resources.
Don't want to use them, but we have them if it comes.
And people to call to help us understand how to use them. Yeah. Or a pharmacist in a nearby boat.
Yes, of course.
Very handy.
So have you ever been in like situations where you felt scared for the safety of your kids, like sketchy country, like walking down? I mean, it's just like a city anywhere, right? If it's a bad neighborhood, you know about it and you try not to go there.
So the side of safety of, as far as I guess, choosing the countries you go to and choosing the places you cruise, we do that partly for ourselves, but almost even more so for them, because our risk calculation is entirely different where our kids are involved. We would never have considered the Red Sea, for example, this year because of having the kids.
That said, we went to Papua New Guinea where everybody dies by machete.
Right. And witches are still burned at the stake. Right.
And they eat people still in the hills.
Yeah. We met what, first generation cannibals, and it's like that's just still there's still stuff that happens.
There's a lot of things out there.
It took a lot of research to go to a lot of places that on paper look too dangerous, and but in reality you get into it and you learn what the real danger is, and very often you find that the story that's out is the worst scenario that happened. It gets
puffed up with even more hyperbole to make it look even better in the media,
and it gets multiplied. So it didn't just happen once; it happens 10 times, and it's not that we're cavalier and you're cavalier about going to places like that, because we're not. We're risk averse. Right. But it's figuring out
our kids in that danger.
It's figuring out what the real risks are, and so in a place like Papua New Guinea, where the reputation is terrible and very, very few people go there because of that, being researched for a year and talked to the few people that had been there and cruised there, and quickly figured out the pattern to what's scary and what the danger is, and it was easily avoidable, and we had a phenomenal time.
It's probably one of our favorite places.
Cool.
Yeah, in 8 years, Papua New Guinea is the one that sticks in the heart.
And we never felt danger. We never felt scared or threatened. We would show up and you talk to the chief and you say, "Chief, are there any rascals here?" And he'd say, "No, we'll watch out for you." And it was a guy who's built like a fire hydrant, and they were watching out for you. It was fine. So, but you have to do your homework,
right?
Yeah,
and it's understanding island culture and a bit of the kind of tribal culture in Papua New Guinea and things like that,
and showing respect as well.
Respect is
not being pompous and arrogant and
dressing accordingly in Muslim countries or PNG, which is like old world Christianity. No tank tops and women have to wear
cover
skirts.
Your shoulders. I have to cover my shoulders to my knees, basically, and I'm all right.
But that's okay. That's another teachable moment.
Yeah.
Why is it like this? Well,
wilderness kind of EMT stuff that we had as our training. So the first thing you do is sort of slow down and take your pulse and really think about what you need to do. And you should have a process for what you do. Is that you have a contact that you can get a hold of on your sat phone if you need to, or just on a phone, or maybe you're in a place where you can actually reach out to local medical services. And if you're not, just even having the basic sort of triage training that you can do to stabilize long enough so that you can get someone who's informed enough to help you get through the emergency. And then just remembering that it's that eeny % of a chance that happens to any of us anywhere.
Yeah, there's some leap of faith involved in that something can happen, and you hope it doesn't happen, and you prepare as best you can with the limitations that we all have, and that we are remote, or we're not remote, but maybe in a country without the best medical care. But we can also live in suburbia down the street from the clinic because we're fearful of accidents happening and never go beyond that. And that's, if you're happy, that's great. We want to see stuff.
I think what people also forget is that kind of like people everywhere need to eat. People everywhere just about have healthcare at some level. And, right?
Yeah.
But the basic life-saving EMT type stuff is usually available. So unless you're spending 6 weeks out in Chagos or you're on a passage.
And Diego Garcia is still
right.
That's right.
Fairly close.
We're actually, our access to informed healthcare is not that bad. Now, it may not be the level that you want, like what happened earlier this year, and a friend of ours got a bad cut in his leg, and when they were in Madagascar, and he ended up getting very, very basic triage at a health clinic in Madagascar, and then flying to South Africa and spending several weeks in a hospital and in PT. It was kind of a good example in a way of a sort of extreme bad accident turning out okay.
As in bad accident, his tendon got ripped out of his leg and was on the outside of his leg, and they wanted to cut it off and sew it back together, and we were like, no, let's not put him to sleep, let's not, let's not
do general anesthesia here in this country.
Stabilize him, and then we'll get him somewhere where they have a hospital that can without rats running around in bloody sheets, and then we'll figure it out. So.
And also like in like getting all the medicals before you guys decide, because you said you have, you know, like we do as well, we have a lot of like antibiotics and everything on board, like, you know.
How do you get that?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we took a few different medical training courses done by a doctor, and he understood what our goal was, what we were doing, and was happy to help write prescriptions and help us find sources for the supplies that we needed. He put together what he thought we needed to be remote with children. And your family doctor will often do that as well. It's you work with them. It's a trust thing, and
unless they're trying to obstruct you from leaving, which would mean you need a new doctor.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like we're going traveling with our kids for this long. We're going to be remote, so we need painkillers, we need antibiotics, we need injections,
splints,
my guess is
suture kits.
Depending on where you live, there may be some limitations on what they're allowed to prescribe for you, and I don't know. I just don't know about that.
Yeah.
We didn't have any trouble in 2008, and we've had no trouble buying things along the way.
We did it in Australia too. We just took in our old prescriptions that were all expired because we hadn't used them. We're like, okay, we need, you know, more doxycycline and we need more azithromycin.
And I know people who've done that in Southeast Asian countries, and we did that in Sri Lanka. And I went into a pharmacy in Seychelles, and I meant to swap out some antibiotics. I didn't get around to it. They're like, no problem. No problem. And in most of the world, a lot of those meds are not controlled to the extent that they are in the States.
Well, they're super cheap. They're
and they're so much more affordable.
So do you guys have insurance or no?
We do.
We do.
Yeah. Well, actually, at the moment, are we between?
Sort of between right now.
Yeah.
So it's like international medical travel insurance?
Travel insurance.
Yes.
So it's not recognized by ACA back in the U.S., but since we're not spending time in the U.S., it's okay.
It actually stipulates we can't spend more than a few weeks per year in the U.S. because...
Up next, we talk with Jamie and Bean about their thoughts for a kid-friendly cruising boat.